What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video I'm going to be going through my top 36 running backs for week 3 of the fantasy football season. Honestly, a pretty tough week for running backs. We have some of the elite options out. Nick Chubb out for the season. Saquon Barkley already ruled out. We have some other top options who may not play in this week. So tough landscape at the running back position, but we got to power through. Going to go through my top 36, splitting these players up into tiers. These are going to be the players that I'm at this point in the week assuming are not going to play. So we have Austin Eckler. I don't think he's going to suit up this week. Hasn't practiced so far this week. Also, I think Aaron Jones probably isn't going to go. And then I also think David Montgomery, Justice Hill, and Jamal Williams, those are guys who don't seem like they're trending in a super strong direction to play in week 3. So keep that in mind, because some of the other guys in their backfield may be pushed up because of those potential injuries. But let's jump into the rankings. So we're going to start it off in tier 1. 4 players in this tier. These are just your stud running back ones, going to have large workloads. Christian McCaffrey, Tony Pollard, Bijan Robinson, and Josh Jacobs. People may be wondering why Josh Jacobs is up in this tier, considering he's had 2 not so great performances to start off the season. His usage has still been really strong, and the Steelers have been really rough against running backs to start off the season, so I like the matchup for Josh Jacobs. If you guys have those players on your rosters, they're obviously going to be fired up as starts in your lineup. Moving into tier 2, we're going to have Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ramondre Stevenson, and Joe Mixon. Some more guys I feel very, very confident throwing into my lineup. Travis Etienne and Kenneth Walker have both had very strong workloads to start off the season. Like the matchup for Etienne going up against the Texans. Derrick Henry hasn't had the crazy usage in terms of snap share, but his carries per game are still really strong. He's also been kind of getting involved in the receiving game, which is nice to see. Going up against the Browns defense, which is tough, I still think he's a great start. Mid-tier RB1, especially with all the injuries, Eckler, Chubb, Saquon, he does get pushed up a little bit. Jahmyr Gibbs kind of benefits from the David Montgomery injury. I still don't think that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be used as some sort of workhorse. I think we're going to see a guy like Craig Reynolds slide in, take some snaps. He is going to appear later on in these rankings. But we saw Jahmyr Gibbs command 9 targets in the week 2 game. He's going to be very involved as a pass catcher, and then he'll probably increase his carries at least a little bit here in week 3. So I like him as an RB1. Ramondre, very strong weekly back-end RB1 play. Mixon hasn't put together any crazy fantasy performances, but his usage has been really strong, involved as a pass catcher, just kind of needs to get into the end zone and needs that Bengals offense to click. Now shifting into tier 3, just going to be a 2-man tier here. Raheem Mostert, James Cook, these are just guys that I feel have very locked-in workloads at this point in the season. Raheem Mostert is the Dolphins' clear lead back with Jeff Wilson on IR. A-Chain hasn't really broken out yet in that running back room, so I think Mostert's a great back-end RB1 option. I didn't think I'd be talking about Raheem Mostert as a back-end RB1 in week 3, but that's the kind of the point we're at here with these running backs. James Cook pretty much is going to do everything for the Bills except for have that touchdown upside, which I still think is fine. He's going to be efficient on the ground, involved as a pass catcher. He will be an RB1 for me this week. Now moving into a very, very large tier 4, and this is where these rankings just kind of get all over the place. If you told me heading into week 3, I'd have guys like Josh Kelly, Kyron Williams, even Swift, Zach Moss, all these players locked in as early to mid-tier RB2s, I definitely would have thought you were lying, but that's where we're at this point. So tier 4, Joshua Kelly, Kyron Williams, DeAndre Swift, Brian Robinson, Rashad White, Zach Moss, James Conner, Miles Sanders, and A.J. Dillon. So starting it off with Josh Kelly, like I said at the top, I don't expect Eckler to play in this game, and we saw Josh Kelly operate as the starter in week 2, and it didn't go all that well. Going up against the Titans, it was a really tough matchup. His workload was solid, his usage was solid, the production just didn't come. I'm not panicking. I think this is a nice matchup here against the Vikings. We just saw DeAndre Swift run all over him on Thursday Night Football, attached to one of the best offenses in the NFL. I like Joshua Kelly here. I guess it's a high-end RB2, but a lot of these guys are kind of interchangeable in this tier. Then we have Kyron Williams going up against the Bengals, and I actually kind of want to talk about Kyron Williams. Obviously for this week, I think he's a nice high-end RB2 play, but I really think Kyron Williams is a prime sell-high candidate. I didn't talk about him in my sell-high video just because I didn't think he'd be getting as much hype as he was kind of throughout this week. I think in the short term, he's a great play. Week 2 with Cam Akers out and Cam Akers now traded to the Vikings, he had a 95% snap share, 87% raw participation, 14 carries, 9 targets. That usage is elite. That's fantastic. You just keep firing him up into your lineup in the short term. But here's my concern kind of long term here. He really wasn't great with those opportunities. Like, it's not like he took those 14 carries and dominated. He had the lowest rushing yards over expected per attempt in week 2, so he was very inefficient as a runner. We've also seen Sean McVay just be very volatile with his running back usage. Looking back to the 2022 season, people thought Akers was going to be the guy heading into week 1. He played under 20% of the snaps and was just a total non-factor. And then it was like, okay, Darrell Henderson's going to be the guy. He logged an 80+% snap share in week 1. He was released during the season. So their week 1 starter was released early on. Akers was a non-factor in week 1, but then ended up having 4 straight 75+% snap games in the back 4 games of the season. So then he ended up being the guy towards the end of the 2022 season. Kyren Williams slipped in there for the 2022 season with a 70% snap share game. So this running back room was all over the place. And I don't think that Kyren Williams is like some elite running back who's going to force Sean McVay to like leave him in the lineup and continually give him this huge workload. He's also not a huge running back, so the idea of him having like a 90+% snap share, it really doesn't seem super sustainable. I don't think this is a super stable role. I think he could have work eaten into by a potential free agent coming in. I even think Ronnie Rivers could take touches. Zach Evans even potentially could slide in there. So I think if someone is going to value Kyren Williams as like a season-long workhorse, I would definitely try to sell him as that moving forward. So a little bit of a tangent there. I like him this week, but I do think he's a nice sell high option. After Kyren Williams, we have DeAndre Swift. If Kenneth Gainwell is not healthy enough for this game, I think you could probably bump DeAndre Swift, like, I guess, above Kyren or above Joshua Kelly. The concern is that if Gainwell's healthy, they go back to a committee. But if Gainwell isn't in there, I think DeAndre Swift is just going to operate as the workhorse again, like he did in week 2. Behind Swift, Brian Robinson. He's had a super strong role to start off the season. He's the clear running back 1. Gibson's the clear running back 2. So I like him here as a mid to high end RB2 option. Rachaad White, really strong usage in week 2, had a much better game, way more efficient. And we also saw Chase Edmonds go down with injury, and he was kind of a guy that was starting to filter in. They trusted him on third downs with pass protection. It seems like he's out of the picture at least for week 3, so I like Rachaad White. Then we have Zach Moss coming off of a massive workload game. I think you could definitely argue him higher. I would like him more if Anthony Richardson was playing. I guess you could go back and forth. I think Richardson probably makes this run attack a lot more efficient, but I guess he would also be vulturing touchdowns. So either way, I like him as a mid-tier RB2. It does seem crazy that we're slotting in Zach Moss as a running back 2 just in week 3, but that really is where we're at this point. Behind Zach Moss, I have James Conner. Really tough matchup, but his usage is just really, really strong. Really one of like the workhorses we have left here. Behind him, I have Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders has a much better matchup, but his usage isn't as strong as James Conner. Still like him as a mid-tier RB2 this week. A.J. Dillon, an RB2 with Aaron Jones potentially missing this game. That's what I'm assuming with this A.J. Dillon rank. Just not a super explosive back. He's not overly exciting, but he'll probably be given a decent workload. Then we have Isaiah Pacheco, who is a really strong matchup this week going up against the Bears. He kind of separated himself in that backfield in week 2. Week 1 was all over the place, had a much stronger role in week 2. If the Chiefs go up, I could definitely see Pacheco having a big game here, just, running it out on the Bears to end it. Then I have Najee Harris. This is a really nice matchup against the Raiders, who have really struggled to stop opposing running backs. I don't really like Najee as a fantasy option, but I do think this is a week he is potentially playable. With all the injuries and the plus matchup, he is still going to be their running back 1, so he's like a back-end RB2 for me. And then to wrap up the RB2s, I have Javonte Williams. Solid matchup here against the Dolphins. He is operating in, somewhat of a committee, but he's the guy getting most of the work on the ground, and he will have some involvement as a pass catcher. Then we have Gus Edwards. It seems like Justice Hill is dealing with turf toe. If Justice Hill was healthy, I'd prefer him over Chase Edmonds. Over Gus Edwards. But at this point, if Justice Hill is out, I would expect Gus Edwards to handle most of the workload in that backfield. There are definitely some opportunities that could be given to some other depth pieces on their running back room, but I think he would be the best option if Justice Hill is out. Behind him, I have Dameon Pierce. And it's kind of tough ranking Pierce this low, especially in a week with a lot of running back injuries. But I feel like that's where we're at here with Dameon Pierce at this point. I still think he can improve on his role in the future, but at this point, just looking at it objectively, he's pretty much like an early down grinder. on a not very strong offense and on an offense that has shown they're willing to throw the ball a ton, which does not benefit Dameon Pierce because he's not really in there running a ton of routes. So right now I feel like this is kind of where he's slotting in as like a high-end RB3. Hopefully he's able to get more involved as a pass catcher or put together a nice day on the ground. Behind him, I have Breece Hall. Obviously, with Breece Hall, you're just kind of waiting for him to really build on that workload. Not a great matchup here against the Patriots. We'll be interested to see if the Jets offense can do anything against this Patriots defense. Behind him, I have Jerome Ford. And Jerome Ford is another guy I kind of want to zero in on in this video. I have him pretty low this week, but it's not due to the signing of Kareem Hunt. I feel like a lot of people think that Kareem Hunt is the better option for fantasy over Jerome Ford. I really do not think that's the case. The only reason I have him low is because the Titans are a really bad matchup. We saw it last week with Joshua Kelly. Really limited his production. The Titans are just a team you really want to throw against, so it does not benefit the running back position. But when we're looking at Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt, I definitely think that Ford is the better option moving forward. Even though they had Kareem Hunt in the room last year, and Kareem Hunt throughout his career has been a really strong running back, the Browns really were not interested in bringing back Kareem Hunt last year or heading into this season. They were perfectly fine rolling into the season with Jerome Ford as their running back too. And what we saw in week 2 was that Jerome Ford looked impressive. He came in for Nick Chubb. He balled out. He handled a solid workload. So I still think there's going to be somewhat of a split, but I would definitely prefer Jerome Ford moving forward. Like if I had the choice between him and Hunt, I would definitely be taking Jerome Ford. So he's potentially a buy low option, especially if he kind of underproduces in this game. A potential buy window could definitely open up there. Behind Ford, I have Tyler Algier, kind of like the first running back too, making the appearance here. He's going to have a solid workload on the ground. I don't know if this game script is going to benefit him going up against the Lions. They could be trailing, but I still think he's a decent RB3 play. Then behind Algier, I have Kendre Miller, and I think Kendre Miller has the opportunity to move up a little bit. The Saints running back room is pretty much in shambles right now. Alvin Kamara still suspended. Jamal Williams, I would be surprised if he plays this week. We had Kendre Miller, who a lot of people were pretty excited about heading into the season. He has not been able to be active in week 1 or week 2, but he logged a healthy practice here in week 3. So I imagine that he would be the guy they want to lean on. Now, I don't know if he goes from, not even being active, being injured, to all of a sudden being the workhorse for the Saints, but I would guess that he probably would be their lead back, which in a thin week at the running back position is potentially relevant. And he also is someone who could just be sitting on waivers at this point. So definitely someone who's kind of worth an add here in week 3. Behind Miller, I have Alexander Mattison. I was kind of warning about Alexander Mattison earlier in the week. He had been really rough through 2 games. He was very inefficient, and I just did not think that the Vikings were going to consistently give him a strong workload. I thought Ty Chandler would eventually eat into it. Turns out, Ty Chandler didn't even need to do that. They went out, they traded for Cam Akers, and this is not me thinking that Cam Akers is some sort of world beater who's going to come in and take all the touches for Alexander Mattison. I just think neither of them are all that good, so I think this is going to be somewhat of a split. But if you have a few not so great running backs splitting touches, the fantasy, result of that is not going to be great. I still imagine he's the RB1 here because Cam Akers is kind of getting there late in the week, but I think he's definitely trending down rest of season. Behind Madison, I have Craig Reynolds. I think he could slot into that David Montgomery role. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if he just took the exact David Montgomery usage. I really would not be shocked. But there's also the chance that they kind of split that between a few different backs. Jahmyr Gibbs gets some more work. So he's going to be more of like a back-end RB3 for me. Another guy kind of stepping up, we have Matt Breida, Saquon Barkley out for Thursday Night Football. This is really a bad matchup for Matt Breida here going up against the 49ers. If you were hoping to get something out of him, this is definitely not the ideal situation here. I wouldn't really love him in my lineup. I guess if you're forced to, it's fine. He'll probably be their lead back, but this also could be somewhat of a committee. And then at 34 and 35, we have Khalil Herbert and Roshan Johnson. 2 guys kind of in this Bears 2-headed committee at this point. Tough matchup against the Chiefs. Just not a super interesting backfield at this point. And then to wrap up these rankings, Jaylen Warren, I believe he's the best back the Steelers have. I don't think he's going to get the opportunity to be the running back 1, but in a plus matchup, if you're super desperate, big league, I guess he is potentially someone you could throw into your lineup or a flex spot if you are really desperate. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 36 Week 3 running back rankings. Hopefully this video was helpful in getting you guys to set your lineups. If there are any updates throughout the week, injuries, someone's playing that I thought wasn't going to play or someone isn't going to play, you guys can just keep commenting on the videos. If you leave a new comment, I'll try to get back to as many of those as I can. Thank you all for stopping by. Check out my wide receiver rankings. Those are going to be up today also. But thank you all again, and I will see you in the next one.